building a high impact and lean tech team in fintech. So at AssetPlus, we have a team of about 8 to 9 engineers today. But for a long time in our journey, for the first 4 5 years, it was 3 to 4 engineers that we had. And with just these engineers, we were able to scale up the platform to having 2 lakh customers and close to 3 to 4 thousand partners as well. And this is how we did it. The same might not apply to others, but some of the learnings that we have had, we plan to continue it moving forward as well, because we feel it gives us a significant edge. Now, there are two aspects that I want to broadly talk about. First is, how do you ensure that the right kind of engineering is being done by the team? And second is kind of a checklist of productivity hacks that small engineering teams can use today to be able to build and scale things faster. So let's talk about the first aspect. This is something where the structure of the company matters a lot. Now, if you are a company in the fintech space, you have to ensure that top management, and if founders, then the best thing. So either the founders or the top management has to be involved in the engineering side of things, right? We see a lot of times that there is a huge divide, huge gap. Not, I wouldn't say divide, I would say a huge gap between the leaders and the engineers, that leads to things being done without much purpose. And if you're trying to keep a very lean team, then you have to ensure that it happens as close to the top level as possible. Now, how does that change things? The firstly, if let's say one of the founders or one of the top people in the company are related to engineering, the team members see themselves having a much brighter future, right? Because they are doing things not because just someone is telling them to, but because they are really contributing and aligned to the journey of the company. And for engineers, specifically, what I've seen is genuine engineers are more creative than transactional. They would prefer being given the time and space to be able to think and contribute, not just with their code, but even with their intelligence, right? And that is something we recognize very well at Asset Plus, and we ensure that every new team member that joins us gets to do that. Now, the aspect of keeping the team lean also comes from there. If you are not connected to the reality of how engineering is done, you might just think that you can throw people at the problem and that will solve it. So if you're having, let's say, 1 year of time to be able to do something that should take 2 years, then how about I just double the team members, right? But it doesn't work like that. Yeah, even if you triple the team members or you quadruple the team members, also you might not be able to do it in 1 year. Some of these problems that are being solved by engineering teams is not just about you sit and code. There is a lot of thinking, innovation, and ideas that go into it. So the lean nature of the team also has to come from a deep understanding of, this is not just a people problem. This is something that really needs a lot of thinking. All right, now coming to the second part of the chat, which is about what productivity hacks engineering teams can use today. So, over the last 7 years of us developing Asset Plus, we have come across so many new technologies, and every year we are seeing that things are getting easier and easier for engineers to be able to work, so that they can focus more and more on their core business logic. And now today we have also migrated most of our stack to some of these items that I'm going to be sharing with everybody. So the first and foremost for us, the biggest game changer for us was the launch of Flutter. So Flutter is a cross-platform app development framework, which is maintained by Google, and it's completely open source and a lot of open source contributors as well. It's one of the most starred projects on GitHub. And so what Flutter essentially allows small engineering teams to be able to do is they can immediately be present on multiple platforms, essentially Android and iOS, right? These two are the major ones. And not just that. So not it's not just about, okay, instead of building two apps, I'm just building one app. But even that one app, the amount of time that it takes to build a native Android app or a native iOS app is much, much larger than the amount of time it takes to build a Flutter app. Now, why is that? Because Flutter is a modern framework. They have had a lot of learning from all the frameworks that were launched since the in the last 7 to 10 years, right? So there were Angular JS, and there were a lot of other things, and React was launched, and React was kind of a game changer in this space about how people used to think about frameworks. And then Flutter is pretty much based on React only in terms of how the whole framework is planned. And they have massive experience in customer user interfaces, and that all reflects in the way Flutter code base is set up, or the Flutter framework is set up. So it is a extremely fun framework to work with, saves a lot of time for engineers, and development speed and development experience is mind blowing. So Flutter is the first thing that I would recommend. Now, the second thing I would recommend is something called AWS Copilot. Now, this is a slightly unknown, tool. It's essentially a toolkit. It's neither a framework or a platform. It's a toolkit. It's called AWS Copilot. Now, off late, I mean, there is no denying that containerization has become the norm when it comes to deploying applications these days. And the major benefit of containerization you realize after you start using it. Earlier, you would set up a machine and you would try to run your code in it. And if you want to update, you would SSH into the machine, and you would pull your code and you would restart your system, etc. With containerization, it doesn't feel like that anymore. It just feels like you are writing your code, putting it in one box, and someone else is taking care of launching the box. And the box always works. It doesn't have to be launched in the same machine every time. It can be launched in any machine tomorrow, and the box would work the same way. So containerization is amazing. Now, one of the major platforms, which is AWS, has something called Elastic Container Service. So this is a service you would use to be able to run containers in AWS Cloud. Now, if you look at the entire setup of how you would go about running an application on ECS, it has a lot of things that you need to pick up, a lot of things you need to learn, and most of it has to be done via the UI, and that makes things a bit more complicated. That's where AWS Copilot came out, and it helped us a lot. What it essentially does is it converts your entire infrastructure into code, and it's a single simple manifest file which does not have any boilerplate. So it has a lot of defaults on its own. If you feel like customizing something, you can just customize that, and everything else is taken care of for you, whether it's creating the environments of test environment and prod and stage, or whether it's about hosting your service on HTTPS, so it's also internally taken care of. Your Route 53 is also present, which helps in creating your endpoints automatically, right? So you essentially just in your CLI type one line which says Copilot deploy, and it'll package your application, create a Docker image, launch it on ECS. It'll create a Route 53 record. It'll create HTTPS certificates for you. And in the end, you directly just get a URL and take that URL, plug it into your application, and you're done. So it has made the entire process very, very seamless. And because it's again using AWS resources, your users and identity management still works, and you can control who can deploy to test, who can deploy to stage, who can deploy to prod, etc. So this is the second tool that I recommend very highly, and it has kind of changed the way AssetPlus used to be able to do deployments. Now, the third thing is not a single tool, but it's a class of tools. So we have all heard how amazing, free and open source software is. We use a lot of these open source softwares, and most of the companies use it. It's not just us. Most of the companies use open source, and that in itself is a topic to discuss about how open source is amazing and how people should, contribute to open source. But there is one thing that small engineering teams should start tracking if you are trying to build a lot of features by yourself, and that is called self-hosted FOSS, right? So there are lists on GitHub where you can find, it's called awesome self-hosted or awesome FOSS, where these are essentially again entire so there is a lot of tools that we personally use. Let's say there is something called Strapi that we use, something called Uptime Kuma that we use. Now these are different applications. All you need to do is you get the Docker image URL for from the project, you put it into a AWS Copilot manifest file and Copilot deploy, and that's it, and you have that server running in your account in your VPC, and it's completely self-hosted. It's all your infrastructure. You don't have to subscribe to anything, you don't have to pay anything, you don't have to worry about data being shared with the outside world, nothing, right? It's all within your control and you're just using the application. So there are plenty of tools available, and I highly recommend that people make use of these self-hosted open source projects. Of course, check everything if there are no issues with the project, and check the health of the project very well. But if you have ensured all of that, just use AWS Copilot, self-host it, and get going. So these are the three productivity hacks that we use at AssetPlus, and which I hope can help other engineering teams as well.